and Chase is going to help us with the guitar and help lead, and we'll just go from there. Then we're going to turn it over to the band after that. But Kingdom Changers, I hadn't forgot. Okay, so if everybody will stand.
See, we're well prepared this morning.
I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Some glad morning when this life is o'er, I'll fly away to that home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away. Just a few more weary days and then I'll fly away to a land where joy is never end. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away.
Was that it?
That's good. Thanks.
I didn't know it was next.
All right. Do we have any birthdays this past week? No? Okay. Do we have any announcements?
We will have Ladies' Night Out on Thursday, August 19th at 6:30. And if you want to save the date for the church picnic, that's going to be Sunday, September 19th. And then VBS is Sunday, August 8th. Amy, did you have anything you wanted to say about that?
Mrs. Batson, visitation 4 to 8 Tuesday, funeral Wednesday at 11. Is there a dinner or? No. Okay. Okay. No dinner with that. And that's it. Amos Carvelli. Okay. All right.
We are having youth tonight, real actual youth, not finishing where we're actually gonna have youth. At 6 o'clock in the Fellowship Center, so anybody going into 6th grade through high school, please come out. Listen to the message and
All right. You say that was
at 6 o'clock.
sixth grade through 68? Is that what you said? Something like that?
That's what you heard.
Okay. Mm. Okay, any others? All right, if not, we will turn the service over to the Kingdom Changers.
Yesterday morning, I woke up and I just kind of wasn't feeling quite right and just wasn't sure what to do. So I got ready and jumped in my car and headed to Maybe and put fresh flowers on Greg's grave and cleaned it off because it's marble and it's huge and birds love it. But anyway, that was all free. I've been hanging out with Mitch way too long.
That's a good thing.
It really is a good thing. And then I just absolutely poured my heart out to the Lord. Told him exactly, haven't done it for a long time. I just poured my heart out to him about how I was feeling about everything. I came back and put the Windex away and climbed back into the car and sat down. I was just thinking. I don't think I was even crying anymore. I was just thinking. And something compelled me to look back at the headstone again, so I did. Looked back at the headstone, and something caught my eye, and I looked up, and there is a mountain behind where Greg is buried, and there was just a little tiny section of trees, probably just one, maybe two trees, and the leaves were absolutely dancing. I've never seen something like that in my life. I have proof. Anyway. And I was mesmerized by it. And I knew that the creator of my soul knew what I needed in that moment. Knew that I needed fresh breath breathed over me, that I needed a warm hug, and he sent it in that way. So I thought, wonder if I can videotape this. And I thought, probably not. So I grabbed my phone and I look up really quick to see if they're still moving, and they are. So I have a 30-second clip. Maybe because the Lord knew I needed that too. Just that one section. I showed it to the band last night. Just that one little section. All the rest of the trees. And it was at the bottom. It wasn't even at the top. It was at the bottom. All the rest of the trees were still. I don't know where you are this morning. I don't know if you need a fresh breath breathed over you. I would say we all need that quite frequently. Just like the valley of dry bones. Sometimes we just need that fresh breath from the Spirit breathed on us. The first song we're going to do, is called Rattle. And listen, this has the drums are really loud. It's a very deep bass drum, and it's really loud. We absolutely love it. It doesn't matter if that's what's going on or if it's in the stillness. If you need that fresh breath, this is where you get it. Just come to him today. Rattle. Please join us.
surely it was through. But since when has impossible ever stopped you? Friday's disappointment is Sunday's empty tomb. But since when has impossible ever stopped you? This is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the praise make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out, and I'm gonna live again. And this is the sound of dry bones rattling. Pentecostal fire is stirring something new. You're not gonna run out of miracles anytime soon. Resurrection power runs in my veins too. I believe there's another miracle here in this room. And this is the sound of dry bones rattling. And this is the praise making dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out. I'm gonna live again. And this is the sound of dry bones rattling. My God is able to save and deliver and heal and restore anything that He wants to. Just ask the man that was thrown on the bones of Elisha if there's anything that he can do. Just ask the stone that was rolled at the tomb in the garden what happens when God says to move. I feel Him moving it now. I feel Him doing it now. I feel Him doing it now. Do it now. Do it now. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is the praise make a dead man walk again. Open the grave, I'm coming out, I'm gonna live again. Open the grave, I'm coming out, I'm gonna live again. Open the grave, I'm coming out, I'm gonna live again. This is the sound of dry bones rattling. And this is the sound of dry bones rattling. This is Barry the Workman. Becca likes this song.
Whoa, whoa, oh.
Stephen was a deacon in Jerusalem. They dragged him out those city gates to try and quiet him. When Stephen preached, those Pharisees started throwing stones. Before he died, he raised his eyes and saw Jesus on the throne. Said, you can bury the workmen, but the work will go on. You can silence the voices, but you can't stop the song. When the Spirit's moving, His will be done. You can bury the workmen, but the work will go on. And James was sent to heaven at the edge of hair and sword. And Peter, he was crucified like his beloved Lord. Oh, the Roman Colosseum, the lions and the fire, the gates of hell did not prevail. They fan those flames higher, 'cause you can bury the workmen, but the work will go on. You can silence the voices, but you can't stop the song. When the Spirit's moving, His will be done. You can bury the workmen, but the work will go on. And then they lowered Jesus, they laid Him in a grave. They thought that it was over, that His name would fade away. But Jesus wasn't listening, no. He rose to life again, 'cause God is not persuaded by the arrogant man. And you can bury the workmen, but the work will go on. You can silence the voices, but you can't stop the song. When the Spirit's moving, His will be done. You can bury the workmen, but the work will go on. You can bury the workmen, but the work will go on. You can silence the voices, but you can't stop the song. When the Spirit's moving, His will be done. You can bury the workmen, but the work will go on.
Okay, I'm in. Since Chase was so short in his introduction of the last song, I'm going to borrow a little bit of his time, but I'll talk fast. Okay, so my week, this past week has went something like this. Monday, found out Dad had COVID and was admitted to the hospital. Tuesday, went to what I thought was the doctor about my hurt finger, only to have the nurse look at me and say, "So you're here for your colonoscopy." And my eyes got big. I said, "I thought I was here for my finger." She just looked at me like I was crazy. So, okay, Wednesday afternoon, Dad was released from the hospital evening. Later in the evening, I rubbed under my eye, and this happened. I don't know. I didn't rub hard. I don't know why it happened.
I didn't do it.
Then Mitch and Chase were outside working on the truck, so they're each other's alibis. But they said Mom was in the house with me, so she's suspect. So Thursday, my dad's oxygen, he had gotten out of the released from the hospital. His oxygen dropped to like 72 or 74. So they got him to Mon General, and they admitted him, of course. And Friday, he was moved to the ICU, and they were considering a ventilator, which terrified my stepmom and I. Just the word ventilator just sounds like a death threat to me, or death sentence. So all day long Friday, I was getting up and down reports like he was doing good, then it dropped, he was doing worse. They didn't know what they were going to have to do. And in between that, I was running back and forth from work to the eye doctor, back to work to my family doctor, and she sent me to UHC to get tests to rule out any internal bleeding or blood or fractures in there, which thank the Lord I don't have. But Friday was not over yet. Friday night, as I was talking to my dad, which now we're just texting because it was just wearing him out talking to people, obviously. I was talking to him, and Mitch's mom chimed in calling me. And so I didn't answer, and I went in there. I'm like, call your mom, see, what she needs. I just figured she was telling us about an upcoming birthday party. So she said she was having heart symptoms, and she was calling an ambulance. So we met her at Fairmont Hospital, and they had to stop her heart and restart it to get it back in. I guess it was beating too fast or out of rhythm. And so, thank the Lord she was released the next morning after they, watched her all night. So she's home. So today, life is still chaos. Like, my emotions through this week has just been up and down and, out of whack completely. But God. But God, I don't know how anyone does it without him. I just, or why they would want to, I just don't. This next song is so powerful. I really love it, The God Who Stays. It's a powerful reminder to me that if we give our lives to God, he is there with us no matter what we've done in our past, no matter what we've done yesterday, whatever we're going through, whatever awful stuff on this earth we're going through, he's there with us. He gives his love, his mercy, and his protection when we need it. Unlike people who are sometimes reliable, sometimes not reliable, they walk out of our lives sometimes, God won't. God is just there, and I couldn't do it without him. I just love him, and nothing can separate us from him, and this song is a great reminder of that.
On me by now, I would've labeled me a lost cause I feel just like a lost cause. If I were you, I would've turned around and walked away. I would've labeled me beyond repair, cause I feel like I'm beyond repair.
Oh, but somehow you don't see me like I do. Somehow you're still here. You're the God who stays. You're the God who stays. You're the one who runs in my direction. When the whole world walks away, you're the God who stands with wide open arms. And you tell me nothing I have ever done can separate my heart from the God who stays. I used to hide every time I thought I'd let you down. I always thought I had to earn my way, but I'm learning you don't work that way. Oh, but somehow you don't see me like I do. Somehow you're still here. You're the God who stays. You're the God who stays. You're the one who runs in my direction. When the whole world walks away, you're the God who stands with wide open arms. And you tell me nothing I have ever done can separate my heart from the God who stays. My shame
song, Holy Spirit. It's one of my favorites. We just want to welcome him into this place, to dwell with us in his house. And I love when the bridge says, let us become more aware of your presence, and let us experience the glory of your goodness, because he is with us all the time. It is just a matter of us being aware of his presence. So let us intentionally be more aware of his presence here today.
There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord.
Well, good morning to you, CMC. Today feels almost a little bit strange. We here at CMC, of course, are not unused to at all having missionaries here. It's part of our DNA. It's one that we're very proud of. But it seems like recently, with all of the COVID craziness and everything that's been going on, it's just really slowed down our ability to have people here in person. But this morning, we are privileged to have with us for the first time missionary Zach Motts with WGM. He is a missionary to Japan, and I'm gonna, let him just sort of have his freedom and introduce himself more specifically or anything like that. But Zach, we're glad to have you and your daughter Zoe with us this morning, and we just ask you to come and share your heart with us.
Oh, maybe I'm in the wrong place.
Long story short with the sound system, just so everybody knows, something is not hooked up and there's no control over the sound in the back right now. So that's what's going on with that. So there you go.
Okay.
So you're on this now.
All right. Very good.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Good morning. My name is Zach Motts, and it's very good to be with you this morning. As was said, I'm a missionary with World Gospel Mission. And if we have the slides? Yes. Those are my hydrangeas in Japan. I miss my hydrangeas. When Brandon invited me to come, I had no idea that this was Frank Martin's home church. I just did not know. An interesting fact is that I grew up south of Canton, Ohio, in a small town called Waynesburg, Ohio. And in Waynesburg, Ohio, there's a little country church named the Little Country Church of Waynesburg, Ohio. And the first pastor of that church was a Reverend Angler. And Reverend Angler is the father of Sharon Martin. So I feel like I've connected dots in my life being here today. And I would like to take a moment to thank you for sending us Frank Martin. For Frank and Sharon Martin, I would imagine that this church has been a supporting church of theirs for a long time, right? And I would imagine that even after their ministry out west, this church continued supporting them as they were support staff with World Gospel Mission. And as support staff, a lot of times when people go into that role, that ministry, support drops off because their ministry, people go, well, you're not out there where you were. Now you're at headquarters. But thank you for continuing to support them because they have been such an encouragement to us in our ministry. They have come to Japan multiple times to be with us. And Sharon Martin was one of the first mobilizers that I met at World Gospel Mission headquarters. And helped me through my first term to get to Japan the first time. And, you know, Frank and Sharon, like, you can't find more encouraging people than Frank and Sharon Martin. So thank you. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for helping us in that way. So maybe next slide. I can see back there, can't I? Okay. I grew up in that little country church, and that little country church was always about missions. They had a Men with Vision group that was big into the farm school in Honduras. My grandfather at one point got in a truck and drove parts from Ohio or Indiana probably to Honduras. I don't even know how, Timken steelworker farming guy ended up going on that trip, but he did. And I heard about all my life these WGM missionaries that came through, and didn't really, when I was young, didn't really think very much of it. It was just a natural part of what we did at church. But after that little church decided to send a group of youth on a mission trip to Honduras, I came back from that trip and started realizing that my heart was shifting, that I had an interest in what God was doing in the world. And if I could be a part of it, I wanted to be a part of that. So I went from that point on to Asbury College, studied missions and Spanish, because I figured I'd end up in Latin America. Those were where my experiences had been. I ended up, after Honduras, going to Paraguay, and then Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Mexico. And I thought that's where I was going to end up, but then God started shifting my heart again towards some of the least reached countries in the world, some of the places where the church has the smallest numbers, and Japan is one of those places. It's a place where about 0.7% of the population is Christian. So a very, very small number of people, and churches are rather tiny. Lots of big cities with very few churches. But while I was, I can see over there, while I was in Japan, that's where I met my wife, Esther. So there we go. And my daughter Zoe's with me today, but Esther is not. The reason for that is that towards the beginning of this past year, my sister-in-law was having a baby. She was having her third child and started having complications towards the end of the pregnancy. But that story, long story short, the baby was born fine. But when they ran tests on the complications, they found that she had a brain tumor. So she just had a baby, and then while she's in the hospital for having the baby, she finds out that she has a brain tumor. So Esther returned to Japan. We thought it was important for her to be there for her sister and the baby and the children. And we decided that she needed to go back as quickly as possible. And so she left right the day after Easter. Her sister had a surgery, was in the hospital for about 2 months. And during that time, it's COVID in Japan, as you've seen from the Olympics and so forth. So there wasn't a lot of contact, no contact that her sister was able to have with her during that time. So if you could remember the family in your prayers, and hopefully Esther will be able to come back soon. But that's why, unfortunately, it's just me up here. And she's not able to be here today. But while in Japan, maybe click, we do a lot of different ministries in Japan, pretty much based on what the church is looking for. So my ministry, a lot of it has been itinerating to different churches, and over here, maybe the church is looking for someone to preach, over there, children's ministry, youth group, something like that. And historically, we've also been heavily involved in college student ministry. One of WGEM's first ministries in the 1950s was with college students at Todai and Rikyo universities. Click. Thank you. This is, I made masks for our children's Sunday school thing that we did. I terrified some small children with those masks. Maybe next one. So this was a children's summer camp that we did, and one thing that you do in Japan is you, in the summertime, smack a watermelon with a stick. It's kind of like pin the tail on the donkey with piñata. Piñata is the better idea. It's like piñata with a watermelon. And so for this event, I made that wonderful watermelon stick and became the watermelon guy. Maybe next one. And I'll talk about it in a minute, but children's programs at church, part of what we do. This is teaching a fun English children's program. Next one. So do English storybooks and things like that for very small children. Okay, next one. Another ministry that we've been working on lately, the person, well, in that picture on my right, is Robin White, who is a Wesleyan missionary. We work together in a federation with World Gospel Mission and Wesleyan missionaries, and the denomination that we work with, Emmanuel General Mission. But Robin White right now is working on an online comic book, series of comics, manga, that he has been putting together by, he and I have been writing scripts for Bible story manga, and then he has connections with artists from different parts of Japan that he's having come in and draw the comics. So that's an exciting thing, and hopefully we're going to get our first proofs and things out soon. So looking forward to that. Next one. Oh, that's just COVID in Japan, and that was my COVID haircut. So next one. Okay, so that's just a little bit of introduction. In November, we returned from being in Japan for 4 years and 3 months. I've been in Japan for a total as a missionary of 8 years and 3 months. But there are many good things that happened over this last term, many hard things that happened. You know, it was a lot of life this past 4 years. The first few years were very busy because I became team leader in Japan. We have 2 other missionaries, Holly Mulheisen and Brandon Kuba, who are missionaries with WGM there. And we settled back into life in Tokyo. Zoe entered Japanese public school from kindergarten to 3rd grade. And we started rebuilding our relationships and working with our contacts in Japanese churches. Partway through that time, Holly Mulheisen came back to the U.S. to raise support. And I took over for one of her ministries, the one called Fun English, which is an amazing, much in demand ministry. As I said, in Japan, many of the churches are very small, and Christianity is a very small minority of the population. So many times the communities around the church just have no idea what goes on inside a church, right? They view church as a mysterious place. Like one of the ways that one of our larger churches tried to remedy this was they made the bottom floor of their church glass on the outside so people could see in what was going on. But it's been difficult. It's difficult for churches to help people cross the threshold of the church and get inside. But Fun English is a program for children where we sing songs and do crafts and work on simple vocabulary. And it's not an overt Bible lesson or themes most of the time, except maybe Easter or Christmas. But the program is about creating a safe place for children to come into the church with their mothers and the family just feel cared about, be able to interact with church members who come and volunteer at Fun English. And those connections and those conversations are actually one of the best parts about that particular ministry. And we call this ministry a bridging ministry because it's this neutral, low-stress space where people can meet and share and just have those first experiences inside a church. And this has been a very important type of ministry in a place where Christianity is seen as a foreign religion, seen as a European religion. And in Japan, those types of bridging ministries, those safe, open places, are so important to the welcome of the church. In the last 2 years of our term, Esther got a job as a pastor at an international church in Tokyo. And they needed someone who could work in English and Japanese, who had the speaking skills to be able to connect with both parts of their community. And Esther fit the bill. And she loved that ministry. She loved pastoring there. And through that church, she was able to connect and work with a very diverse group of people. Japan in general is like 97.8% Japanese, really high level of Japanese, pretty homogenous. But in that church, she worked with a group of refugees from Cameroon who were living in Tokyo. And Esther got to meet with those people, pray with them, help them with their paperwork and keeping up their status in Japan, the bureaucracy. And that was an important part of what she did. And at the end of the term, everything got weird, just like everything got weird all over because of COVID. Japan was one of the first countries to start dealing with COVID after China and South Korea. If you remember the Diamond Princess cruise ship that was parked not very far away from where we were in Yokohama. But even during that time, one of my richest COVID experiences was that one of the churches that I worked with asked me to do twice a week a Bible study over Zoom, where, because of the Zoom, we could all look at a painting together. We looked at a painting and a Bible passage. And, everybody had their own screen. You could zoom in on different details. So we talked about Bruegel the Elder's painting of Icarus and suffering. We talked about Pablo Picasso's Guernica and hope. During a very strange and very frustrating time, that Bible study that we had together week after week was an important source of encouragement for me during that time. And then we returned in November, and we actually got a dog across the Pacific too, which was strange during COVID. And so here we are once again. We're going around support raising in this much changed environment, right? And I'm sorry, the best I have back there right now is this card. Because Esther's not here, I haven't been able to make a proper prayer card with all of us. So need to work on that. But if you want to reach out to us, if you want to contact us, get our prayer letter, things like that, you can always reach me that way or through zach.motts@wgem.org. But I've been thinking a lot about bridging ministries and how we reach out to others even before that point that we would normally call evangelism, right? How we reach out to those who are on the outside and the type of welcome that we give. Mission is always about crossing boundaries and borders and barriers. And I think it's important today to look again at the way that Jesus did that. So we're going to look today at a very familiar passage from Luke, Luke chapter 19. So if you want to follow along with me, I'll be reading Luke chapter 19, starting at verse 1. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He is gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost." So this story of Zacchaeus, maybe we could do the last slide. It's just calm scenery, yeah. This, of course, is a favorite story of Sunday schools, right? It has tree climbing and it has height discrepancy, so children identify with it. But because we heard it in Sunday school over and over again, it seems like such a simple Jesus forgives a wicked tax collector kind of message. And it's easy to overlook some of the other things that are going on here. And for one thing, it's the story of Jesus eating at a table with someone. That probably seems like an extremely mundane detail, right? But I think it's extremely important in the book of Luke. The Gospel of Luke points out those stories about hospitality, whether someone is welcomed to the table or rejected. And when I think about it as a missionary, the first time I was invited into the home of a Japanese family and sat down to eat with them at a table, or the first time that college students asked me to go with them to the cafeteria to eat with them, like those things were milestones in my ministry. Like eating together is important. Eating is meaningful. So if you bear with me for a moment, we think about this story of Zacchaeus. We're talking about Jewish life under Roman rule. And we're talking about a culture that is under stress. In the region where Jesus grew up, in Galilee, the Romans crucified thousands of people in living memory. Beyond those pressures of violence, though, there were also pressures to conform to the Roman way of life, to accept the world that the Romans were creating. And in response to this pressure, many of the Jewish people shored up places where they could preserve their identity, the things that made them different from the Romans. The Pharisees, with their focus on the law of Moses and encouraging people to be pure, they were one of those responses. They were saying, we have to be different from them. And this is how we will do it. So one of the ways that they separated themselves and tried to maintain their purity in the face of Roman pressure was through table fellowship with whom they ate. They were very choosy about whom they ate with. They did not break bread with common sinners. They did not eat with people who were unclean. Romans, Gentiles were right out, not welcome to sit beside them and dine. So the table of a Pharisee was a symbol. It was a lot like a flag. And it represented to them the feast at the end of the age, the feast that God was going to prepare, where God would be the host and welcome his people to the table. So that table was an image of the kingdom of heaven for the Pharisees. Everyone else would be shut out. So on earth, Pharisees shut people out from their table, people that they did not believe were a part of God's beloved community. So into that story, enter Jesus, right? And a really annoying thing about Jesus for the Pharisees, I think, is the way that he talks about tables, right? If you remember the story in Matthew, there's this Roman that comes to him, right? This Roman asks for help with a servant who's sick. And this Roman's not talking about tables. But Jesus praises the faith of the Roman, and then he turns to the crowd, and what does he say? He starts talking about tables. He says, I tell you the truth, many will come from the east and the west to sit down at the feast at the end of the age with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For Gentiles, like many of us, it probably sounds like a nice thing for Jesus to say, right? But think about what his Jewish audience would have heard at that time period. What? Our heroes? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? The symbols of who we are, our national identity. You're going to say they would sit beside a Roman? A Roman. No, Jesus. Our table is not for people like them. The feast at the end of the world is for God's people, not them. And then we have this story about Jesus sitting down at the table of a Pharisee, right? It seems like Jesus doesn't turn down an invitation. It seems like he likes a party. And things get messy at this party when a woman that the host sees as sinful and disreputable enters the party and approaches the table to wash Jesus' feet. And in the mind of the host, she's ruining the symbol. She's destroying the moment. They were a picture of the kingdom of heaven before she arrived. We can't say that sinful people like her are going to be welcome at God's table, so she shouldn't be here. Throw her out. But what do we find? Jesus defends her presence. He defends her hospitality. He says that this table was not the picture of welcome that it should have been until she arrived. in this context, Jesus is very shocking in what he does, right? His table fellowship is radically open. And what he does is saying something about the radical openness of the love of God. And it was threatening to many of the people who were trying to build their identity in a world that was us versus them. When people are under pressure, they like to have clear lines around who we are and who they are, right? The thing about Jesus, though, is that he messes up our lines, doesn't he? And think about it. He's this young man. He's, 32 or so? That's not a very... As I've gotten older and I passed the age of 32, the idea that he said some of the things that he did in crowds is more and more striking to me. He's a young man, 32 years old or so, and he stands up in Galilee, where the Romans recently crucified so many friends and relatives. And he says what? He says, be like God. Love your enemy. Be like God. Love your enemy. Maybe to us that sounds kind of soft and fuzzy. But to the people listening in the crowd, that was like a hot poker to the stomach. That was something that would make you ball up your fists. If you are our teacher, why aren't you on our side? Why aren't you with us, Jesus? We know who our enemies are. How dare you say that they're deserving of anything that looks like love? And we have to remember that the Jewish wars start just a few years after Jesus' death. And within a generation, the fires of war had destroyed Jerusalem. So violence and hate are boiling just below the surface when this young man decides to stand up and say, love your enemies. And when he thinks about eating at the same table with Romans. I think about the history of some of our first missionaries to Japan and the time period that they went just after the war. And I wonder how many people in the churches they went around to were ready to love their enemies. I think this is what makes the story of Zacchaeus so surprising and dynamic, this context. Many times we come to this story with the idea that Zacchaeus' problem is that he's a dirty thief, right? And we extrapolate from the idea that some tax collectors charge more than they should. And probably that's what Zacchaeus is doing. He's a corrupt tax man. And that may be true, maybe. But it's reading something into the story that Luke doesn't tell us, right? He doesn't make that explicit. And in fact, when we get to the end of the story, if we look carefully, we don't even find Zacchaeus asking for forgiveness, really. There's a little word in there. He says, if I've cheated anyone. Sounds more like he's dealing with the perception that people have of him, not exactly confessing to be a cheat. I think that little if is important. I think the real issue that Luke expects his readers to understand is from the fact that Zacchaeus is a tax collector, and for whom he collects taxes. He's getting rich collecting taxes for them, for the enemy, for the Romans. He's not on the right side. He's not a patriot. He works for them. He's a traitor to our cause. In an us versus them world, Zacchaeus ain't one of us. He's the type of person we feel comfortable alienating. The type of person that when we put that meme up on the internet about those people, we feel good, pat ourselves on the back, right? So imagine the horror, as Jesus picked Zacchaeus' table to eat at. He's walking through Jericho, a famous teacher, surrounded by a crowd. Some say he's the one we've been waiting for. Some say he'll run those Romans out of Israel and restore the kingdom to us. Jesus, the new Messiah. So Jesus, do you need a place to stay? Come stay with me tonight. Jesus, we're having a feast. Come dine with my family. Jesus, I'm the mayor of this town, and it would do me a great honor if you would come and eat with me. I assure you, all the right people will be there. Yet Jesus is looking around, kind of absent-mindedly, it seems. What's he looking for? Is there something strange up in that tree? Seems like he's smiling just a little. Zacchaeus, come on down. I'm going to eat at your table tonight. Everybody had to be shocked. Zacchaeus himself probably about fell out of that tree. I mean, what's happening here? Who is the guest and who is the host? It's Zacchaeus' house and his table and his bread and butter. But Jesus is inviting himself. That's not usually done. Think of Zacchaeus' poor family. It's not Aunt Gertie dropping by for a visit. This is the famous teacher and his disciples and probably everybody else who's coming along. And yet, Jesus is acting like the host and inviting Zacchaeus to Zacchaeus' own table. What does that mean? And why would Jesus sit at a table with this person? He's not the right people. He's on the wrong side of everything. He's one of them, and people are talking like he cheats widows and orphans and honest folk out of their money, Jesus. We don't eat with people like him. He won't be at the feast at the end of the age. You see, though, Jesus sees God differently. You can see the theology of Jesus through his table fellowship. Jesus shows up, and the love of God is there for Zacchaeus. It's there. In this little story, we don't see Zacchaeus praying the sinner's prayer or even asking for forgiveness. But the mercy of God is there before Zacchaeus even makes a move. The love of God bursts into these hardened battle lines, polarizing Zacchaeus' world, and says, let's eat. Boom. The love of God is here for you. It has found you. And your table in your house is now a picture of what the kingdom of God looks like. It's here. And the table of welcome is open. And it's beautiful, and it's messy, and it's risky. And we will sit down together, and we will eat. What will you do with that, Zacchaeus? How will you respond to that, Zacchaeus? Jesus welcomes Zacchaeus to the table, which is actually Zacchaeus' own table. And what he's saying is that the love of God reaches you. God's love is already there for you, Zacchaeus. This open table, this love that moves to love first, this theology of a God who messes up our carefully laid lines of us and them. I think that's part of what gets Jesus killed, right? What does Jesus say at the end of the Zacchaeus story? He says, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. Think of how that would have stuck in the craw of so many listeners that day. They were arguing about what it meant to be a real God follower, what it meant to be in the community of the people of God. They wanted to define the identity of us, the ones getting it right, the ones who were really children of Abraham. And Jesus takes Zacchaeus, a tax collector, a sinner, a Roman sympathizer, someone despised by the people drawing lines, someone clearly on the outside. He smiles and says, him too. He's in too. You don't think the love of God reaches this far, but you're wrong. It does. What do you think this was like for Zacchaeus? He's the outsider, he's the bad guy. And yet this famous teacher, this holy man, wants to eat with him. I think we're all looking for someone like that. Someone who will sit down at a table with us, even though we're not perfect, even with our past, even when we think that we're unacceptable. And we wonder if God could do that. We're looking for someone who could sit down at a table with us and eat and look us in the eye. That's grace that meets us before we even make a move. Acceptance like that, that's energy, isn't it? Energy to live, energy to change. I felt that energy in my own life. And I think the love of God is like that. I think churches and pastors and missionaries, we're all supposed to show that sort of love, aren't we? And we don't always get it right, do we? The love I see from Jesus in this story, the story of Zacchaeus, it's so much more risky and explosive and boundary crossing than we tend to be comfortable with. What would it be like to open our lives and our tables the way that Jesus did? I think mission, our focus on mission, reminds us that every time we draw a line or make a border, a boundary, shut someone out, push someone away, over and over again we find that God is over there, that God is already working and loving and moving, and we have to catch up. We have to run across our borders and our boundaries and our barriers to be a part of what he's already doing. We have to catch up to this Jesus who eats with Zacchaeus and wrap Zacchaeus into his story before Zacchaeus can even fall from the tree. One of my seminary teachers told a story about a time when he was studying in England. There was another student there studying at the same university who was from India. And this student was a Hindu, but he had a lot of curiosity about Christianity. So my teacher and this student, they often talked together about religion. They would eat together, go over to each other's houses, and study life and religion. And one day this friend asked my teacher, "Would you be willing to go to church with me sometime?" And my teacher was surprised. He was shocked even because he hadn't been pushing for something like this to happen. He didn't expect it. But they were in England, so he found an Anglican church for them to go to. And on that day, they were having the Lord's Supper, communion. And my teacher's friend asked, "What is that? What does it mean? How do you explain that?" Whispering at the back of a church, right? I mean, thousands of years, 2,000 years of controversy, right? Lots of history, lots of different ways of explaining, lots to talk about. So how do you explain that on the spot? They had talked about Zacchaeus before, so my teacher answered him like this: "That is Zacchaeus' table, where Jesus welcomes everyone to come and eat with him." The friend answered, "Can I go to that table too?" My teacher's a theologian. He was telling me this story, telling all of us this story in sacramental theology class. He knows about church policies. He knows about the rules and the history and all of that. Can I go to that table too? He looked at his friend and he said, "Yes." Let's pray. Dear Lord Jesus, thank you for this time that we had together this morning. Thank you for the ways that you wrap us into your story, the story of what you are doing in the world. Please show us the places that we need to go. Please show us the people we need to welcome. Help us to join in where you are already working. We often move and work for you out of obligation. We can so easily forget the joy of your love. Lord Jesus, give us that energy, that joy that Zacchaeus had when he responded to you. Help us to be safe and welcoming places. Help us to accept people and bring people in to meet you at your table, to find the renewal and the change that comes from walking with you. Help us to respond freely to your welcome. And open our hearts so we can love the world the way that you do. And love our neighbors. In your name I pray. Amen. Thank you.
Isn't the love of God an amazing thing? It invites us to the table, invites us to participate in what God is doing. And he mentioned Holly. I don't know if you guys remember we had Holly here at the church. I guess it would have been a couple years ago. My time's all off. And she talked about fun English. But one of the things I want to say, and I'm going to have Sherman, he's going to close in prayer, and what we're going to do is we're going to take up an offering, and Carol's just going to be at the back with the offering plate and just kind of drop that off as you, Carol 1, not Carol 2, Carol 1, as you're going back. But I want to say something about Japan specifically, and I remember So in my undergrad, I was a minor in missions, so I took several of these missions classes, and I remember one of my professors talking about Japan is this missiological conundrum for Asia, where it seems like in most Asian countries that there is just, even if it's within the underground church, there is this revival that is taking place and Christianity is moving, and then you hit Japan. And it just kind of is like, not there. And there doesn't seem to be a real interest, and there doesn't seem to be this great, Zach even kind of talked about it, there are a few churches and small churches, it's just the nature of it. And if you want to take an opportunity and want a moment to invest in reaching people with the gospel, not in another reached country, in the world. Those are great things, and those are great endeavors, and we're not discrediting that by any stretch. But Japan needs the gospel. Japan is one of the countries of the world that they need the gospel, and we need to pray first and foremost desperately for the spread of the gospel in Japan. And yes, there are other countries too that on that list, but Japan is one of those countries. And we need to pray for that, but we need to support that, and we need to put our money where our mouth is on that too. And we need people like Zach, people like Holly, people that are willing to go to unreached places of the world where the influence of Christianity is so small, but they're willing to go, and they're willing to build those bridges, and they're willing to invite people to the table that Jesus has already invited them to. They're willing to take people and point them to Christ. And so, Zach, thank you so much for sharing this morning. Sherman, I'll have you go ahead and come on up, and we'll close in prayer this morning, and then